You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Here's what we want to talk about. Has COVID killed 12-step groups?
Wow.
And we're using 12-step groups as we're just gonna be upfront here. We're using 12-step groups as kind of all 12-step groups.
Right.
It could be the favorite one, the most common one. We don't even feel we really need to name them because we don't want to confuse it.
Sure.
But it's, has it killed 12-step groups? Kristina, I want to hear what you have to say, but we should tell people about this article we found too, which
Definitely.
I thought was before we dive into this and get your
Yes,
thoughts.
do it.
So there was an article that was put out by the New York Daily News, a guy named Christopher Dale.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote about how the coronavirus is ruining 12-step groups. And it's not really about social distancing.
No.
And and it's not. So we're going to reference that article, through this segment here. But Kristina, what's your thought? What do you think? Is it killing it?
I think it's had an effect. I'll be honest. I still attend all of my 12-step meetings on Zoom. And I've actually enjoyed it. And yes, it's different, but I have been able to continue the fellowship and get information that I need to get. Now, my husband, who's also in program, used to attend a very heavy meeting, very popular meeting down here in Southern California. And it was 7 days a week. And it was one of those ones that people start their day off with. So you'd have 7,500 people in the room. It is now right around 16 people who are coming. And I know that particular meeting had been going on for at least a decade. And so to see it shrink makes me sad. And I hope that people are filling up their schedule with other ways to connect. I know they tried to do it hybrid, and it didn't really work. It was online, like mine is. It went online after when we were all staying home. And I think when the article was first written, when we were all staying home.
Yeah, it was 2020.
Yeah.
It was 2020
and so
when he wrote that article.
So I got it. But when we had a chance in my particular group, which has always been around 15 people, it's my home group, decided to continue, because what ended up happening, it was actually the reverse, is we started getting people from all over the country, logging in. So we started to have this really great connection with people. But to see they didn't weather it. And I don't know if it'll come back. I know they have some diehard people that show up. He's of service, so he always shows up on his day to do coffee, but I know it's changed it completely.
Yeah. And I think, I'm gonna kind of, I had a similar situation than like your husband.
Right.
I am going to go a little bit further. I think that COVID not only killed 12-step groups because of the physical side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also killed a lot of the culture
that
was around it. Okay. And I'm going to go a little bit.
You're going to do it?
Go a little deeper, because I'm going to actually say what a lot of people say that I talk with. I still have a group that's online.
Yes.
That we meet once a week. And, the average age of recovery for the people that are in sobriety in this group is probably around 20.
Oh,
That's probably the average. There's no one in there that has, I think we have one person that's under 5 years. So
wow.
It's a lot of 12-step. It's a lot of recovery in this group. Right. And I found that what happened is that it killed the big group that I had in the Valley, one of the largest groups.
Wow.
It absolutely shattered it. But I think it killed it, like this article said, a little bit, because this article talks about politics kind of killing it.
I know.
And I think that the whole thing, and I'm just going to be honest with you, unfortunately, things got drug into AA, or I don't even like to say that 12-step, drug into 12-step that had nothing to do with 12-step, like what, the vaccine or
sure,
masks,
your status,
or
what you believe in.
Should we meet? Yeah, what you believe in, right? And there was a range of it, and judgment calls were made, and I saw that happen first. And at first, when there was no vaccine, when there was nothing, I saw this in people that were uncomfortable being tolerant of older people that didn't know how to use the technology.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
And that wiped out in our group, I would say, the top level, the people who are always there, and
Right.
I'm just going to call them, 12 step doesn't call this, but the donors. I'm
Yes.
talking about the people who are actively involved, that
Sure.
make sure that there's a hall that's paid for, make
Hmm.
sure that we have a bank account, right? All this stuff, it wiped them out.
Wow.
And if they weren't Gen X or or had a millennial in the household,
Right.
they were wiped out. And there were people who couldn't afford technology.
True.
They couldn't afford a phone. They didn't
Hmm.
have Wi-Fi. There were people that we had with rehabs that were coming in that couldn't do that, right? And it really
Yeah.
wiped it out.
Well, we know that the numbers of people with substance abuse disorder have skyrocketed. We know that it is slowly creeping up. So even with normal drinkers or gray area drinkers, the consumption went up. We know that for sure. But what is interesting is that whole dynamic that you just shared. It's physically hard sometimes for the bigger meetings to figure out who's raising their hand. There are some cues that we used to get when we were in the room sitting with each other that we don't get. And I know that there's been struggle with that in one particularly large room that I have, where they're really struggling on how to just do the format. Or I should say, and they're still sticking it out.
Yeah.
They're still doing it. So I think that it has changed forever. I don't know
I'm
if
going to
it's
say
killed
something
it.
even a little bit more controversial.
Okay.
I don't think it's killed 12-step groups, because 12-step groups evolved and they went online.
Right.
But here's where I think that the culture of 12-step, there was a lot of it was the culture of 12-step, right?
Right.
So there were a lot of things that weren't never really written down. Like, so for
Absolutely.
example, you're not going to be able to stay sober if you
Mhm.
don't go to a physical meeting. People
Right.
would say that, although it never said that. I
No, it
don't
doesn't
remember
say that.
reading anything
Mm-mm.
that ever said that. There were maybe examples of that, right?
Right.
But there was a long tradition. And when it happened, when 6 months came, 3 months, 6 months,
Mhm.
a year and a half, 2 years, as this has started to go on, what's happened is I know a lot of people who were very, very, very diehard into the culture and tradition of 12-step
Yes.
that have changed their mind. One guy in particular, he said, I'm choosing not to go back to physical meetings. I'm going to go once a month. It's going to be a social thing only. I'm not
Mhm.
there for I'm doing everything online. And I like it that way, and I'm better off that way. And I was like, for this guy to say this, honestly, Kristina, I was shocked, honestly.
Whoa. Right. Right. I don't know if I would have fallen into that category, but I did always believe until we were all forced to go home that you had to be knee to knee. Recovery meant that you connected with people in a physical space. It was important for me to see other people living a sober life. And it was
Yes.
important, the culture after, and the friendships and the meeting after the meeting, where you went to go have coffee after and continue. That has been removed from me. And in place of it, I have found other outlets that are talking about recovery, which I do love. I love that we're on Clubhouse. I love that Recovered Life is here and that we can
Yes.
talk about these things. I love the idea that we are interconnected all over the world. I mean, you and I both know a beautiful person who lives in Wales,
Yeah.
and she contributes to my recovery program just as much as anybody did sharing in a live meeting. So,
I would say even more, because
right.
they're more accessible in a weird way,
Yes.
and I'm with you on one thing that, I think too, Christine, is that there was problems with 12-step groups as far as safety for women.
Right.
That was always a huge thing that we were always concerned about, is making sure that women felt comfortable, that there were other women around,
Right.
right? Because it is a little different, I think. It is a little
Mhm.
different. And making sure that it was a safe place for people to come, right? And I think the politics injected into it, the
Yeah.
people's judgment of,
Yes.
and really not being accepting
Mhm.
that hey, maybe somebody's got a bigger health issue, or maybe
Mhm.
somebody has no health issue at all and they're absolutely fine going,
Yes.
right? And not wanting to hold hands, right, at the prayer in the end, like all these different things, and the finances of it. Let's be made, like, things have
Yes.
become a lot more expensive, harder to get in insurance policies and all that other kind of stuff. If you're running these big groups, it's very,
Absolutely.
very difficult. And I think with things like Recovered Life and we're not saying that we're a substitute,
No.
but coaches like yourself,
Yes.
there's more things in the Dharma recovery, smart recovery,
Right.
religious groups that have, right? That
Yeah.
more things kind of came into the mix, and it's not necessarily the go-to place anymore.
It isn't the only place, that's for sure. And when I first got sober, I really believed it was the only place. And maybe at that time, 25 years ago, it really was the name of the game. It was what we did if you were going to get sober. But all of these things, we had a show this week about Sober Curious and what that's doing. And I think that this is a wonderful conversation for us all to be having at this time. I know people who first were introduced to sobriety via Clubhouse and have just celebrated a year. I know people who have participated in Smart Recovery or one of the other ones who've done Celebrate Recovery. And there is not a sobriety difference between us. And that's really
Gabri,
what
who
opened.
we interviewed on Wednesday, had not gone to a physical meeting. She says in some interviews, had not even gone to a physical meeting in a year.
Wow.
Her first year, because it just wasn't available, right? Not because she was unwilling to. It's just that
Sure.
just was in her area was not available with COVID. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Kristina. I think that this is an exciting time
It
in
is.
recovery, actually. And I don't think that and I definitely want to come across, because I've had friends that I've had this discussion with that are very touchy about the
Oh,
subject. And they think, well, you're just not really pro 12 step. Absolutely opposite.
no.
And people who know me
You love the
know
12
I'm
steps.
huge. I'm huge. Like, I really am a huge proponent of the 12 steps. It saved my life, definitely. But I do think that this is an exciting opportunity, and things evolve. And I think in recovery, we have to be open to them evolving.
Well, the need's not getting smaller, that's for sure. And if meetings are not available to us, physical meetings are not available to us, but we have all of these other options. I have to say, after being introduced to Recovered Life, after being pushed into a situation where I had to go online, that I now realize that's not the only way you can get sober. There are other ways. And who am I to say that their recovery isn't as good or as strong as my own recovery? I love the 12 steps too. I love them. But now I'm recognizing you don't have to be in a formal 12-step group to maybe learn from them.
And I think there's also a difference between short-term recovery and long-term recovery. I think if we're going to be honest, I know for me, I'll just speak for myself. I found it a bit dubious that people could just go onto an audio app.
You did.
And do fellowship and just stay sober long-term. Honestly, I've seen it. I don't think that's a long-term solution. I think that there's work that's involved.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that 12-step is great at, is that there's a structure of the work, right? Of doing the work. But with supplementing this with coaching and different other things, people like you, things that we've got going on, I really feel that people are able to go way beyond what they were talking about before. And that benefit for me, that was a lifesaver, because look, we talk about all the time. That's why I created Recovered Life, is because I wanted to have a deeper conversation about how to live your best recovered life. Right. Not just how somebody can come in and get sober.
Right.
That's not super interesting to me. You have to have it.
Yes.
I mean, look, you have to have it.
It's the entry ticket. It's the entry ticket. And what you just described about having to do more, that would apply to in meetings too, because I know plenty of people who just came to meetings and they were able to be sober by osmosis. But that certain amount of rich life, the one that we're talking about, the one that we want, you cannot just show up, even if it's in a Clubhouse room or a Zoom meeting. You have to participate in your own recovery.
Yes, you'll feel my experience in this is that the energy, just from a metaphysical level, the energy and focus and intention of the group, if you're in community with them, can keep you sober for a period of time.
Yes.
But it won't keep you sober long-term if you don't really address your own stuff.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
You're just going to be hanging out in a group. And eventually I find that something happens and that wanes a little bit. And you need to, if you haven't done the work, you're in trouble.
For sure, for sure. We can hold on for a while. Sometimes it can carry us. It's carried me sometimes. There have been, times in my recovery where I wasn't doing the deal as much as I had before, but I had so many connections and those neural pathways had been built that I didn't pick up, but pain would come. And then I would be like, oh gosh, I got to go back and do some work. I got to figure it out.
And that is, I think, something with people that are working remotely, recovering remotely, is that because they're at home and in a comfortable place,
Right.
maybe the pain isn't as significant as it
Maybe.
would be. It's not all at once, right?
Sure.
Whereas if you were out in the world doing all that stuff, you might be a little bit more aware of this.
Absolutely.